After 40 years of wandering in the wilderness, the Lord told Joshua to lead the children of Israel into the promised land.
The promised land was the land God promised to Abraham hundreds of years before.
It was such a bountiful and prosperous land that it was a land described as flowing with milk and honey.
But there was a problem. The Jordan River stood in their path.
You might say, that's okay, they can just find a bridge. But there was no bridge.
And there were millions of people that needed to cross.
When the people saw the flooded, rushing river in front of them, they probably despaired. They were so close.
How would they get their children, their sheep, their cows, and their wagons across the river?
And that's a lot of stuff.
Would the children of Israel send their army corps of engineers to build a bridge?
No, it would take months to build a bridge.
And under the leadership of Joshua, they would trust in God.
When they were kids, many of them probably remembered how God parted the Red Sea for Moses.
God was about to do the same thing.
Only instead of Joshua holding out his staff over the river like Moses did for the Red Sea, God was going to have them do something totally different.
He told the priests to carry the Ark of the Covenant up to the river.
Then he told the people to stand about 2,000 cubits behind the ark. That's about 1,000 yards.
Then God told Joshua to have the priests go stand in the water.
Why did God have the Ark of the Covenant go first?
The Ark of the Covenant represented God's presence, God's holiness.
God's presence and holiness would go before them as they entered the land.
When they stepped into the river, they didn't sink or get swept away.
The waters parted, just like they parted at the Red Sea for Moses.
And God's people crossed on dry land.
God brought them out of Egypt's bondage with a miracle.
He brought them into the promised land with a miracle.
The Red Sea is a picture of salvation, God delivering his people from sin and death.
What is the crossing of the Jordan a picture of?
Hebrews 4:1 talks about God's people entering into the promised land.
Therefore, while the promise of entering his rest still stands, let us fear lest any should have failed to reach it.
The writer of Hebrews describes the promised land as entering into God's rest.
The promised land is a picture of the life a Christian can have when they enter into his rest.
Rest means peace with God.
Rest means freedom to enjoy God.
Rest means freedom from wandering in the wilderness.
Rest means living for the gospel.
Rest means living a life filled with the Holy Spirit.
Let God go before you and put your faith in him.
We need to make sure we're putting our hope in Jesus.
When we trust God and are filled with His Spirit, we will enter His rest.